My topic is about processable high-performance hydrogels for application in bond repair. And for the introduction, I don't want to talk about hydrogel because I believe all the audience here are experts on this topic. So what I want to explain is why we did this work. Actually, we did this work under the requirement of orthopedic clinics by the doctors. They also noticed that hydrogel is a kind of a potential material for bone repair. They want to use it for the treatment of articular fracture with bone defect. And they ask for the hydrogel as a kind of cement. That means the hydrogel should be stiffness, and in our words, it should have a high compressive modulus, and it should be also tough, and be able to fill in any irregular shaped holes or defects, and could work as carrier of bioactive materials. And we know that hydrogel could be toughness because there are examples as some of the double network hydrogels, which is tough. And hydrogel can be fillable because there are so many injectable hydrogels. And the carrier property is kind of a native activity. A native ability to hydrogels. Somehow it's difficult for the hydrogel to be stiffness with high compressive modulus because most of the hydrogel is brittle and weak. And the more difficult thing is to ask all these characteristics together. We know that hydrogels and maybe many of the materials to increase the mechanical properties in contradiction with their processability. But our solution is we also use dynamic crosslinks, and we want to introduce organic-inorganic hybridization. Previously, we have done some work on hydrogel, especially injectable hydrogel. But what we have done is we use dynamic covalent bonding to cross-link polymers. Like shown here, we use kind of shift base, but it's not normal shift base. We use benzoic imine. Actually, there is an article ring next to the carbon-nitrogen double bonding. Benzoic imine is much stable under the physiological condition. The reaction is the use of benzoaldehyde to react with the amino groups in polyamine, like chitosan or its derivatives. The advantage is the first thing is because the benzoic imine bond is somehow stable, so we can use a macromolecular crosslinker, a linear polymer to crosslink the polyamines. In theory, this part of polymer can be anything that's hydrophilic or amphiphilic. And this kind of bonding, the formation of the bond is quite safe because the product is only water and salt. And the reaction is under mild condition, such as the physiological condition. So the mechanical property of this kind of hydrogel is more like chemically cross-linked hydrogels rather than physical hydrogels. Besides covalent bonding, we offer the hydrogel to be self-heatable. So the next step, we synthesize the injectable double network hydrogels. Double network hydrogels is somehow difficult to be injected because normally the two networks should be formed one after another. But by using the different kind of dynamic interactions, we can adjust the kinetics of the two kind of more dynamic interactions. Such as shown here, at first network, we just use the chitosan and polyethylene glycol. cross-linked by the benzoic imine bond. And the second one is even more popular, is calcium arginate. So we really did a lot of rheology tests and successfully get this kind of injectable double network hydrogels. For the mechanical property, we can say here the double network has better improved or better mechanical properties compared with the two parent single network hydrogels, but it is only better than the two single network hydrogels because no matter the strength and the modulus is in the kilopascal range, is far away from the mechanical property of form tissue. So we need to find a way to further improve the mechanical property. What we have done is we introduce hybrid structures. The hybrid structure is not limited to inorganic or organic hybridization. We also introduce hydrophobic microdomains inside the hydrophilic polymer network. And meanwhile, the hydrogel was cross-linked by dynamic converting bonding or other dynamic interactions for the injection. So here is the example. The polymer forming the network is polyvinyl alcohol, PVA. And for the cross-linked polymer, we use a rigid small molecule, which is 4-carboxyl phenolboronic acid, or CPVA. This small molecule has two reactive groups. For the boronic acid, it can react with the hydroxy groups of PVA to form borate bonding, the borate bonds, which is kind of dynamic converting bonding. The other end, the carboxyl group, it can coordinate, form coordination with multivalent cations like calcium ions or ions. Therefore, the polymer can be cross-linked. Besides, the aromatic ring can also form a kind of hydrophobic interaction by stacking. So when we mix those things together with water, hydrogel can be formed like shown here. And when we increase the fraction of the CPVA, the small molecule, because the interactions are all dynamic, so we found that the small molecules can aggregate together to form a kind of hydrophobic microdomains inside the hydrogel, and then it can reinforce the polymer network. And here is some results. We can see here when we increase the polymer content together with the concentration of the PVA, both the compressive modulus and the fracture energy or the toughness increase, and even within a linear relationship that's shown here. And from the volumes, we can see that the hydrogel is tough, and this can be even screwed, and the screwed hydrogel can afford tensile force within certain extent. But for the stiffness, the modulus, the modulus is over 1 megapascal, but it's not that high. It's only several megapascals. But anyway, because the hydrogel was formed by dynamic interactions, the hydrogel can be injected through a needle, like shown here, and the injected hydrogel also has a compressive modulus over 1 megapascal. But when we want to further increase the modulus, we face difficulty because the system is very viscoelastic. It has very high shear modulus, so we can. It's difficult to be injected, like shown here. We can see the drill is not stable already. The dice well can be clearly seen. So we need to find other ways, additional ways to further improve the mechanical property. Before we do this, actually there is a byproduct of the hydrophobic microdomain, because we found the inclusion of hydrophobic microdomain inside hydrogel can improve the adhesion property of the hydrogel, especially in wet state. So, like shown here, we just slightly modified the chemical structure of this PVA hydrogel. It exhibits like a kind of hydrogel adhesives. Can adhere different kind of substrate, both in dry condition and underwater. So back to the mechanical property of the hydrogels. So we recognize that only hydrophobic microdomains may not be enough, not stiff enough to give a high inch reinforcement to the hydrogel. So what we did is we introduced some more rigid, very hard particles, like kind of solid particles. Here we selected the biactive glass microspheres to be blended into the PVA hydrogel. But we found that it's not very easy to blend large amounts of solid particles into a hydrogel matrix. So what we have done is we introduced another polymer called the ethylene glycol to form a composite network with the biactive glass particles through hydrogen bonding. So it's kind of composite double network hydrogel. This hydrogel can be easily injected. We'll show it later. And for the compressive modulus mechanical property, we can see here, hydrogel was added different amounts of biactive glass particles, 10%, 20%, we even can get 40% or 50%. So just like shown here, with 20% of the particles, the injected hydrogel has modulus near 1 megapascal, not that high. But we found the mechanical property can be improved with time when we put this hydrogel inside into a simulated body flat, because of the biactive glass particles. Biactive glass particles can be bimineralized to form hydroxy peptides to form a relatively continuous inorganic network inside the hydrogel. Therefore, the mechanical property, no matter the modulus, the stiffness or toughness, can increase with time during its serving time, during the serving period. Normally, hydrogel, like shown here, the mechanical property decrease with time. But the problem is also the stiffness is relatively is somehow increased, but the volume is not so very big. So next, we actually introduce a kind of percolation structure inside the complete double network hydrogel. What we have done is we just replace the polyethylene glycol by calcium arginate, because calcium arginate can form egg box structure, which is very rigid to have a relatively long correlation length. And in this case, it can form a kind of interconnection structure with the solid particles, and therefore generate a very stiff 3D network, which was penetrated by the soft PVA networks. We can see here with the increase of the particle component, volume fracture, and modulus, the compression modulus increase sharply when the volume is over a threshold. But the disadvantage is that this kind of hydrogel is very difficult to process, because the interpolymer or intersegment interaction is very strong. So we actually divided the processing procedure into two steps. In the first step, we didn't add any multivalent ions, didn't add and didn't use calcium ions. We used sodium arginate to form the hydrogel in the first place. And with sodium, the sodium arginate chain is relatively not as rigid as the calcium arginate. So the gelling, the hydrogel can be processed. The polymer chain can slip with shear force. Therefore, we can produce the hydrogel like shown here. Although the hydrogel with larger amounts of particles is not easy to be injected, but it's plastic. This can be nailed and molding. So after the molding, we can just put the hydrogel into an aqueous solution of calcium dichloride to give a secondary ionic phosphate. And after this, we find that the compressive modulus can reach 20 megapascal. It's 10 times higher than the former hydrogel. And when the particles are still by active glass particles, we can also again get bimineralization. And within 1 month, we can see that the compressive modulus increased to 80 megapascal. And with the optimized chemical composition, actually we get even higher stiffness. The highest modulus we got is more than 200 megapascal. And this values actually is in the range of cancer spawn. So here actually we have got high performance hydrogel with either high stiffness or high toughness, and meanwhile this can be processed even though it's not by injection. At least it is plastic. So next step, we tested the possible application of these hydrogels in orthopedics. The first experiment is cartilage repair. We use a rabbit model, make cartilage defect on the joint, and put the PVA tough hydrogel inside the mold and see what's happened. We found that high performance hydrogel really helps because we see in the first month, cells and scars can clamp or cover the hydrogel surface. And after 3 months, the hydrogel disappear and replaced by subconjunctival bone. And the histopathological sessions actually indicates this kind of hyaline cartilage instead of fibrous cartilage. And from Gauss view, we can see here the repaired cartilage is quite smooth compared to control. And the shortage is that hydrogel itself is not orthogenic. So when there is an orthoconjugal defect, in this by using this kind of hydrogel, we can just repair the cartilage but not the bone. So we tested to use the injectable composite double network to repair to get a bone regeneration like shown here. The hydrogel is quite easy to inject the hydrogel, no matter there's blood or not. It can be injected. And what we do next, we just seal the wound and wait. And here is the result. We can see by using the injectable composite double network hydrogel, the bone regeneration is quite fast than these controls, especially when we add growth factors like BMP2 inside the hydrogel. And based on this, actually, we can also make bilayer hydrogel scaffolds to treat orthoconjugal defect in the articular fracture. This takes the feature of the self-healing property of the hydrogels. for the bilayer hydrogel, for the bond, for repaired bond, we can add biactive glass particles inside, and for the repair, for the regeneration of cartilage, we can just add growth factors like TGB beta. And here is the results. Using the bilayer hydrogel, we can get the best results compared to all these controls. But this work, through this work, actually, we can just prove that the hydrogel can be the bioactivity of the hydrogel. It's not proven that whether the hydrogel can be not buried because all these defects they didn't afford any strong compression during the repairment, during the treatment. Then we collaborate with doctors to create distal formal fracture model on rabbit. Like shown here, we break the joint and make a free bond and make a defect here. This kind of model just simulates the disease in orthopedics. Is called tibial fractures in clinical daily clinics. As shown here, the DR pictures, DR images is from a patient. We can see that after the fracture of bone, there is defect. The articular surface collapse. And what the doctor can do now is they just fill the defect with artificial bond particles like the calcium phosphate or calcium sulfate cements. But frequently they will find after operation that recollapse happens because of the faster degradation of the artificial bond particles. Also, the particles is very rigid and can't afford any deformation. So this is a problem. And by our animal model, we can reproduce this kind of thing. And you can show here. By using calcium sulfate cement, after 4 months, we can see the rotate of the free bond around the screw, which causes the collapse of the artificial surface. But when we use the hydrogel, like so here we use the plastic hydrogel. We just molded the hydrogel in the defect and then put it into the solution of calcium chloride for the secondary ionic cross-link, and then put back the hydrogel to the defect and stabilize it by metal fixation. So the result is shown here. No matter after 4 weeks or 12 weeks, we can see the articular surface, the joint surface is very smooth. And we also check the histopathological results, and we find the cartilage layer can be regenerated we can get a very complete cartilage layer and a very desirable bone regeneration, like shown in this results. So we can see that this is the first example, but we can see that very seldomly hydrogel scaffold can support can be used to support bone during the treatment of bone fracture to have the stabilization and reduction of the fracture. This is very seldom. So we just confirm that the hydrogel can be buried, but still have drawbacks. We can see this is an open defect, open wound. So if there is a kind of defect with a small hole, but there is a large cavity, the two-step cross-link procedure may not be convenient and may not be applicable. So we are still working to make more better balance between mechanical property and the processability of hydrogels. No special way. We just work hard to improve the processing design and try our best to develop new kinds of materials. Like shown here, this hydrogel is injectable, and it can be stiff, but the payment is time. It takes longer time to convert from injectable hydrogel to stiff hydrogel. So anyway, we are still working. Hopefully next time we can provide more results. And this is the talk. Here is a summary. I don't want to read it because of time. I just want to thank my collaborators and my colleagues who have helped us to do these works. And finally, this is our campus in Beijing, but not in the city center, a little bit far away. But anyway, the transportation is quite convenient. So welcome, and thank you very much for your attention.